Okay, well, we've talked pretty generally about budgets and planning, but I think we have to take stock of where we are because the fact of the matter is most pharmacies are in different positions, have different employees, different IT. So let's try and take stock of where we are. And so the first thing is IT. Now, everybody has a dispensary computer. But what general ledger do you use? What general package do you use? Have you got an internal accountant? Do you have an external accountant? How often do you get your statements right now? Do you get them monthly? Do you get them annually? What about your front store? Do you have a POS computer? Do you monitor the results of that monthly or annually? So that's step number one. Number two, what key information are you getting? Are you just getting total dispensary sales and total front store sales? Well, if you have a point of sale computer, that breaks everything down by product. Are you looking at that? That's a nice place to start. What about monitoring gross profit per product? GIPROI, inventory turns, are you monitoring that? In terms of the dispensary, are you monitoring your average sales price per script, your average gross profit per prescription? What other things are you monitoring? Are you monitoring certain types of prescriptions you fill? These are just some of the things. So you're walking your way through the process. What about your employees? Do you have a chart? Who's in charge of what? Who does the bookkeeping? Who is the front store manager? Who's the dispensary manager? Who does the ordering? Who accepts the orders? Who makes sure everything gets entered properly into your POS, whether it be front store or dispensary? Next, have all the key areas been covered? Do we have all the players in place? This is like putting together a hockey team or a football team. We got a center, we got a left wing. Oh, we don't have a right wing. Oh, well, we can do without a right winger. No, doesn't work that way.
Gotta find an enforcer. Pound that drum.
We got to trade for a new goaltender and we got to trade for a new left winger.
Maybe put a couple on waivers.
Maybe put some on waivers. We have to. These are the things that we're putting in place. We're assessing where we are. What about the key performance indicators? Do you even know what they are? So if you don't know what your key performance indicators are, then how do you know how you're doing?
And you'd have no idea where you currently are right now. You might be doing really well. You might not be doing really well.
The old-fashioned way of keeping track is if the bank statement, if the balance is going up, that's good. If it's going down, that's bad. We have to look beyond those numbers. Okay, I don't have anything else. So we've now, okay, just to summarize, let's take a look at all aspects of our business where we are, because to go forward and to plan for the future, you have to take stock of where you are.
Yeah. So, and recap from what we've done is all of the information, as we say, it's ripe for the taking. You're going to find it in your pharmacy management system. You're going to find it in your point of sale system. You're going to find it in your general ledger. And the key things, I mean, for me anyway, for any pharmacy, it's revenue. Revenue for me is absolute king, but break it out. How much is in the dispensary? How much is in the front store? And if you have any kind of specialty drugs or some other kind of front store product,
Yep.
Break out something that logically makes sense to break out. You don't want to break out Coca-Cola versus Pepsi. That doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. Then you want to break it down into what is the gross profit and get this all on one page. And key expenses. The wages are a key expense. Mm-hmm. Your general administrative are key expenses, and your occupancy are key expenses. And get those ratios and get them on a piece of paper so you understand what it is. Mm-hmm. With your scripts, you go right to the pharmacy management system. You've got new, you've got refills. Mm-hmm. What is the mix of each? Maybe brand, maybe you want to know how much generic you have, because then you can understand any kind of professional allowances you may have. Yeah. And get it just on a piece of paper. Yeah. You only need about 10 line items on a spreadsheet, and then once you get Excel is just the most wonderful thing in the world. Then you can start making things sing and dance, and you can start extrapolating forever how far you want to go.
Yeah. Of course, I can hear you all out there right now. That's really easy to say. I don't have time to get this information. We're circling back again. Of course, we're not expecting you to get the information. We're expecting you to go to your bookkeeper or your accountant and say, here's the information that I need. And they should know how to get it. If they don't, they should find out how to get that information. You're in control of the operation. You're the one pulling the strings, and you want those people to provide you with that information. Therefore, you're spending 15 minutes, a half an hour, a month going through this information. Yes, these other people are spending time getting this information for you, but this is the information you need to make good business decisions. And once you've got this information, you can then plan for the future and make more profits. And that, in the end, that's the goal. Now, some of you might say, well, that's not my goal. My goal is good healthcare. And that's fine. If the goal is not to maximize profits, we have to take that into consideration. But also take into consideration, you cannot provide good healthcare if you're out of business. So profits do have to come in at some point.
So 100% of the pharmacies that fail can't provide good health care? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Perfect.
If we're not there, we can't provide healthcare.
And, I suppose that patients can go someplace else, but they won't necessarily get the same diligence in patient care that your pharmacy is providing.
Well, I'm hoping that everybody out there is developing a good rapport with their patients, because the thing is, they're trusting that you're providing them with good health care. So I'm hoping that you're satisfying that need. And whether it's through med checks, whether it's through conversations, whether it's through synchronizations, start listing all the things. I'm hoping that you're providing the care for them. And again, it doesn't matter whether you're in a clinic and you're part of a health team, or whether you're in a rural area and you're the only healthcare provider within miles. The fact of the matter is, everybody has to provide the healthcare. Everybody's a specialist in pharmacology. You're providing that service, and nobody knows being a pharmacist more than a pharmacist.
Absolutely. And and just to follow back on something you said earlier, is it's not the pharmacy owner that is going out and gathering this information.
Yeah.
You're going to identify. So here's a goal: clearly identify in your mind who the owner is of each individual system. I mean, the general ledger is probably fairly simple. It's either going to be your bookkeeper, controller, business manager, etc. When it comes down to the pharmacy management system, it could be pretty much anybody who understands the pharmacy management. It could be the controller, it could be the bookkeeper, or it could be a technician or an assistant.
Yeah, well, I think what you'll probably find though, Rob, is that for the most part, you don't like your bookkeeper to go into your dispensary to provide the information, but the technicians that can get that information really quickly just have to communicate with the bookkeeper and provide.
You mean like talk to each other?
Yeah, might even say hello in the morning.
Well, buy a coffee every now and again. And of course, similarly with the PO, with the point of sale system, is you want to be able to have something that goes in. And I guess for me, it's two things. It's not just about just running the reports.
Yeah.
I mean, because the reports are only as good as the data that goes in. Crap in, crap out. So if it's the data's not accurate, well, the report you run does not magically come out accurate.
Yeah.
So they don't just own running the reports, they own the accuracy of the information or the data in the information system, so that when you run a report, you say, yep, I did 400 scripts last day or yesterday or last week or however long you do 400 scripts.
It may seem obvious.
It's reliable.
Yeah, it may seem obvious, but the best POS systems, the person operating it was actually a computer person. A person that can pull the information out really efficiently. And the computer system that worked the best was the ones where the owner or the purchaser or the front store manager can communicate with that person and say, here's what I need. Right. And then the computer person will go, oh, I can get that.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, the computer person can provide you with whatever information you want. Yeah. It's just you have to know what you want.
And you don't necessarily need to be a CPA, but you need to have maybe a modicum of business acumen or analytical acumen, just from the standpoint so that if you look at the numbers, you can actually see if there's something that might be wrong. If all of a sudden it says you have $500,000 of inventory and you're typically going at $50,000, possibly there's a data entry error that you might have in there. Yeah. And you just got to be cognizant of it. Just go back in and fix it. It's not about beating anybody up for making a mistake. It's about making sure you get the information you need to make an informed decision.
And the fact is that one of the key things in the computer are exception reports. Is there a number there that looks too big? Is there a number there that looks too small? is our profitability off? Or do we have 0% profitability on some items and 99% profitability on others?
Or negative profitability.
Negative
Or
profitability is
negative.
always a trick. But the thing is that somebody's looking at it, somebody's running these reports, and then somebody's reading the reports, and who has the responsibility. And it doesn't have to be the owner. It just has to be done.
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Yeah, and I think what the owner needs to get is just that final page and say, here's the revenue, dispensary, front store,
Yeah.
here's the gross profit, dispensary, front store, here's the wages expense.
Yeah.
Here, 10 lines on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And here it is. Here's the total number of scripts. Go find out what your gross profit
Yes.
per patient is, or your gross profit per script is, and you can find that out fairly easy. And if you do it on a regular basis, you're just going to find it becomes intuitively more natural, and then you start to expand. And you can plan your day, plan your week, month, year accordingly.
And again, back to I just feel the burning question coming out, or the comment is, but it's going to take a lot of time. And the fact is that initially, as you learn, yes, it's going to take a lot of time. But the fact of the matter is, it's got to take the time initially. Think of anything you did in the past, how much time it took to learn. But once you learned it, it just became natural. And once it becomes natural, it becomes a habit, and there you go. You'll be
and
doing
just to
it.
add, in the old analogy, it takes money to make money. It takes time to make time. So
exactly.
you will be investing a little bit of time up front,
Mhm.
and that's probably the number one reason why people don't innovate, people don't improve processes, because it does take time, but you'll get that return on investment of your time in the future, thus creating time down the road.
Yeah, it's funny how easy it is to say, hey, I can pay $5,000 or $10,000 for this service, but if I have to give up a couple hours of time, all of a sudden the equation comes out, wait a minute, if I take 2 hours of my time versus paying somebody,
Yeah, and that's a whole make-buy decision as far as you can bake into a strategic plan. And every situation is a little bit different, but you got to put the value on your time. How much is it to you, and are you willing to pay something? And there's a lot of things in the strategic time, in the review process, in the bookkeeping process, where it is far better for you to just sit there and say, pay the money, A, because it's going to take you way too much time to do it, or B, you just really don't like doing it. And if you don't like doing it, don't give yourself the headache. Find somebody, either in your pharmacy that's already there, or bring somebody in to do it for you. Because there are spreadsheet geeks like myself who just love crunching through a spreadsheet to make it better so you can get better information more easily, more effectively.
And the aspect of it too is that people say, well, I'm paying money for this and I'm paying money for that. Isn't that going to affect my bottom line? And the answer is, of course. Anytime you spend money, it's going to affect your bottom line. But hopefully you've done planning. You set the goal up front and say, I'm going to spend this amount of money because it's going to make me this amount of money down the road. And we're always looking at cost benefit. And so if the cost is greater than the benefit, you don't do it. If the benefit is a lot greater than the cost, that's what you're looking for.
So basically, by spending money, if you've done that proper return on investment analysis, you've got an initial outflow. So you will get a greater inflow down the road. So you will actually increase your net income, not decrease your net income. And I think that is a myth within pharmacy owners and a lot of businesses, not just picking on pharmacy owners, is that spending money, people look at as an expense, but in a lot of cases, it's not an expense, it's an investment. And you will get that return on investment. So spend $100 now so you make $200 down the road. And who wouldn't want to do that?
Right. Again, we circle back because we're back. That's the whole thing about this planning. It's always circle back. The thing is, you're always making these, okay, now we've made that decision. What's our next decision? And around the circle we go again. Start with the goal and we monitor it, assess it. And what if something out of left field comes into play?
Like
something
a global
we had
pandemic?
A global pandemic. How do we react to something like that? Well, we have to be prepared. And the thing is that, or even something more dramatic than that, and something that affect actually our father's business, is they had a very key employee. And on Friday, they all went home. On Saturday, she had an aneurysm. and died, and all of a sudden on Monday, this person's not there anymore. Think about your employees. What if something like that happened to you? You show up and somebody's not there, one of the key employees. What do you do?
What is your risk element of an employee not showing up?
Yeah, and the first thing most people do is panic, because and in this case it was quite emotional too. Somebody died. But it doesn't have to be. It could be that the person won the lottery and they're just not coming into work anymore. The fact is, you have to plan for these extreme things. What happens if someone doesn't show up on Monday? What do I do?
Yeah.
What if it's the key pharmacist? They didn't show up. What do I do? You can't open your pharmacy if you don't have a pharmacist.
Right.
So what do you do if that person doesn't show up? What about your front store manager? Your front store manager is key in getting goods into your store so you can sell them. What if that person doesn't show up? You need to have plans for, call it disaster planning, things that
Disaster planning, disaster recovery, yeah.
and recovery. And they have disaster recovery for computers. Like if you lost your computer, you've got backups and insurance and the whole bit. But we're not just talking about data, we're talking about people. Because the fact is, your business is people. You've got patients, you've got employees, and the fact is that they work together. And what happens if something happens and one of your employees isn't there? Have you made plans for that? It's not easy to think about, because when you hire somebody, most people think, I've hired this person and they're going to work for me for the rest of one of our lives. And it obviously doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. I mean,
but the thing is that it's one thing if they say, I'm going to give you 6 months notice.
Who gives 6 months notice?
Yeah. Or I'm going to, our Uncle Harold is into time management. And one of the questions that he asked to people is, he says, if you knew you were going to die in a year, what would you do? And everybody would write down what. And the next question was, how do you know you're not going to die in a year? It was like, Does that change your planning at all? Well, I think it does.
Yeah.
So keep things in perspective. You are planning ahead, and you're planning a year at a time, and you're planning down the road as if everything's going to happen. And we're not talking about death. We're just talking about a COVID crisis or something. We're talking about what happens if all of a sudden, well, in the case of pharmacies, what if the government does something crazy again?
Oh, they never do that.
They never do that.
No, like the Pan-Canadian cuts or something like that?
No. How are we going to react in terms of the effect on our profitability? Can we withstand another cut from the government?
Yeah, and so you might have to go, part of the planning process is going out, figuring out how do you create revenue that does not exist today?
Yes.
Could be scripts, more scripts, could products we don't even have today.
Yes. I mean, not long ago, we didn't know about gene testing. Now we do.
Now we do.
How big a thing was mental health a long time ago? How big is it now? What about methadone clinics? How big were they when I first started in here 30 years ago? What about these government plans? When I was here first starting 35 years ago, there wasn't a plan at all. And all of a sudden, the government developed that. The fact is, change is inevitable. Are you going to be able to react to change?
Right. Well, will you react and will you actually embrace change? And in my experience is those who embrace the change and are proactive with the change, that keeps you in control of what your end game is going to be, or what your future is going to be, versus having, like you say, the government coming out, changing the regulations and you reacting. Yeah. You can be proactive versus reactive.
Well, let's talk about survival of the fittest. The fittest are not the biggest. The biggest are not the strongest. The fittest are not the wealthiest. The fittest are those most able to adapt to change. Look at the dinosaurs. They were the biggest, strongest things you ever saw, but they couldn't adapt to the new environment, and they all died. So what about you as a pharmacist? Are you going to be a dinosaur? I use the expression pharmasaurus. Are you going to be a pharmasaurus and wither and die? Or are you going to be able to adapt to the changes that are inevitably going to come?
Well, like taking into account COVID, for example. I mean, all of a sudden now telehealth is a big issue, and pharmacy, filling scripts over email, text, Zoom conferences, etc. Yeah. I mean, that's becoming part of the norm. Yeah. And have you adapted to that? Have you embraced that? Or are you still waiting for the patients to come into the pharmacies, which are happening on a much infrequent basis. So you have to really embrace and evolve to these circumstances that are totally outside of your control.
Yes.
But you got to be able to respond and react to them and come up with various what if scenarios. And it's not about being morbid. It's about just sitting there and planning and trying to understand, what if disaster strikes?
Yeah.
Am I prepared? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, how do you get prepared?
Exactly.
Through the strategic plan.
Through strategic plan. Exactly.
Determine your average gross profit per patient for the prior fiscal year or month, whatever time frame you seem to make sense. Now, gross profit per patient equals your gross profit divided by the number of patients.
This will see how good you are at locating the number within your dispensary computer. Some pharmacists are very good about printing and getting all the information off the dispensary computer. Some not so much. Let's see if you can find this information within the computer.